we will do our best to answer those questions that you have, and you can start now.
Can you just tell us the officer who was involved in the shooting? What race is that officer?
Normally I'd like to think that doesn't matter. I know it does. I also know that there's been a lot of work on social media trying to identify him, so that there are a number of people here who want to do that officer harm. He happens to be African American, and he has several years of experience and is a very active officer. And we are concerned for his safety, and he has been staying with relatives out of town.
Good afternoon. I'm Mayor Tom Baird. I'm joined by Edward Flynn, who is our Chief of Police, and Ashante Hamilton, who is the President of the City of Milwaukee Common Council. Over the last 24 hours, this community has experienced a lot. We have been challenged in a way that we have not been challenged in years. But in a sense, we have also responded. This morning, I was in the Sherman Park neighborhood, and I saw dozens, if not hundreds, of volunteers, people from churches, from the community, from the neighborhood, who were there to clean up after last night. These are people, good people who live in this community, who care about this community, and want this to be a safe community, a clean community, a community where they can raise their families. These are the people that we are all concerned about, the people who live in this neighborhood, who deserve to have a safe neighborhood. Ironically, that is the reason that the officers were in the neighborhood yesterday afternoon, to preserve the safety of this neighborhood, to make sure that families could play and individuals could use the streets. So I want to begin by thanking all of the volunteers, all the residents, all the churches that came out this morning. They recognize that this is a community effort, and to make this a safer community, that individuals need to be involved. I spoke to many people this morning, including a conversation I had with Governor Walker. Governor Walker and I have had our political differences over the years, but we talked about what happened here, about what happened in Missouri, about what happened in Maryland. And this is the decision that we've reached together. The National Guard will be activated, but it will not be deployed unless Chief Flynn decides to deploy it. 125 members of the National Guard are on their way to Milwaukee as we speak. And again, they will be deployed if Chief Flynn believes that that is necessary. I'm hopeful that that will not be necessary, that COM will remain in this community, and that we will not have to deploy those individuals. But if it is necessary, we will do so. I also want to take a minute and talk about the incident that precipitated what we saw last night, specifically the officer-involved shooting that occurred yesterday afternoon. As I said last night at midnight, I received a call at a little before 4 o'clock regarding the officer-involved shooting. I went to the scene and I talked to the command staff who was at the scene at the time. When I left there shortly after 5 o'clock, I would say that the situation was very, very much under control. There were people who were gathering, but it was a peaceful situation. Obviously, there were emotions because an individual had lost his life. And I think we have to recognize that as well, that a young man lost his life yesterday afternoon. And no matter what the circumstances are, his family has to be hurting. I have a 23-year-old son, so I can't imagine what his parents are going through. I also have to say this, though. I have not seen the video. There was a body camera that the officer was wearing. That video will be under the jurisdiction for the time being of the state of Wisconsin, because the state of Wisconsin will be conducting the investigation. I have, however, seen a still photo extracted from that. And that still photo demonstrates without question that he had a gun in his hand. And I want our community to know that he had a gun in his hand. Now, the police officer didn't know it at the time, but there were 23 rounds in that gun, which means that he had more bullets in his gun than the police officer had in his gun. And at the appropriate time, the state of Wisconsin will make available that body cam video because there will be questions. Undoubtedly, there'll be questions that arise from that. But I want our residents and anybody who is watching this to understand that what that police officer encountered was an individual running who had a gun in his hand. I also want to talk to the parents and members of our community for a second. Last night was unlike anything I have seen in my adult life in this city. I hope I never see it again. For every member of this police department, it was unlike anything that they had seen in their career. For every member of the fire department, it was unlike anything they had seen in their entire career. And I'm very proud of the way our police officers and firefighters responded under tremendous, tremendous pressure. What you saw last night was tremendous restraint by our police officers. Not a single shot was fired. Not a single shot was fired by the police. Chief Flynn will talk about the number of shots that we detected being fired as a result of our use of the spot shotter, but our police officers did not fire a single shot. That is tremendous restraint, and I think that all residents should be thankful to our police officers and our firefighters. I'm also happy to report that the 4 police officers who were injured have all been released from the hospital. Please keep them in your prayers, but these are individuals who put their lives on the line to make this neighborhood and all neighborhoods in this city safe. They have all been released from the hospital. But again, I want to go back to the parents and residents of this city. This is still a very volatile situation, I believe. I don't know what's going to happen tonight. Again, I hope the fact that people now understand that this individual had a gun, a loaded gun, and was told by the police officer to drop it. I hope that that in some ways calms our community, because that's what I'm seeking. I'm seeking our community, the city that we love, to be calm tonight and for the rest of this summer. So what is that going to take? It's going to take parents making sure that their sons and their daughters do not get involved in the activities that occurred last night. If we need to go to a curfew, we are prepared to do that. But we are not making that decision right now. But this is certainly the time, because I've been in every neighborhood of this city, and I know how parents feel about their children. And I've been to funerals and wakes where parents have lost a child. We don't know what's going to happen if we have a flare-up tonight like we had last night. So if you love your son, you love your daughter, you love your grandchild, tell them to stay away from this area. Stay away from this area. Let's calm things down. We are going to have an opportunity through the investigation to find out what happened. But I think what we saw last night is we saw a police department and a fire department that acted professionally, that did what it could to maintain the peace and order in this community. And we as a community owe it to each other, owe it to everyone, to do all we can to restore order in Milwaukee tonight and for the rest of this week. Chief Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll spend a few minutes updating last night's events and also share with you a couple of additional items. We're going to identify the name of the subject that was killed in the shooting by the police officer yesterday. I understand his name has already been put out on social media by some people. We'll confirm that. His name is Sylville K. Smith. First name is spelled Sylville, middle initial K, last name Smith. He was born 4/11/93. He does have a lengthy arrest record with the Milwaukee Police Department. Also going to advise you that earlier this afternoon, several shots were fired in the area of MPD District 7. It does not appear the building was hit or anyone was injured, but the shots were in fact heard by the officers. Overnight, a total of 17 arrests were made. 8 adult males were arrested for state disorderly conduct. 3 adult females were arrested for state disorderly conduct. 2 juvenile males were arrested for state disorderly conduct. 3 adult males were arrested for burglary, and 1 juvenile male was arrested for burglary. As of my recounting now, all of those we arrested have had prior criminal records. Last night, the mayor alluded to the fact that our ShotSpot, or gunshot detection system, recorded numerous shots fired in the vicinity of this area last night. The total number of activations was 48. Now, that doesn't mean 48 shots were fired. It means 48 different activations. Some of these activations were 6, 8, or 10 shots fired all at once. That's a single activation. But there was a great deal of gunfire in the area last night between 30th and 51st and Keith to Center. 7 squads were damaged last night. 1 unmarked squad, as you have seen, was set on fire. 1 marked squad was smashed by rioters and totaled. Another marked squad was hit by gunfire, single shot to the trunk area. As you saw last night, we used the Bearcat as a means of protecting our deployed officers. That was hit by 8 rounds of gunfire last night. 2 of those rounds struck the windshield. 1 squad and 1 wagon were struck by bricks, breaking their windows out. We had 6 businesses set on fire last night. The BP gas station at 43rd and Burleigh was destroyed. The O'Reilly Auto Parts at 35th and Fond du Lac was destroyed. Jet Beauty at 35th and Burleigh was burned. The BMO Bank branch at 36th and Burleigh has been heavily damaged by fire. Liquor stores at 22nd and Fond du Lac and 21st and Hopkins were both heavily damaged. The one at 22nd and Fond du Lac was destroyed. Obviously, the loss of all of these businesses is the loss of dozens and dozens of jobs in that community, as well as amenities that many of us take for granted in a livable neighborhood. During last night's disturbance, a 16-year-old female was shot at 43rd and Burleigh. She was transported to the hospital for treatment of non-life-threatening injuries. She was apparently hit either by a stray bullet or other rounds being fired by the crowd. We have no reported uses of force by the police last night. As the mayor mentioned, not only did none of the officers dealing with this disturbance use their firearms, we have no reports of them using their pepper spray, their batons, their tasers, or their hands in such a way as to take somebody to the ground. We had 4 injured officers last night. Mercifully, they were treated and released ultimately. A female officer of ours was hit by a piece of concrete and sustained a concussion and a laceration requiring 7 stitches to close. Another officer was struck by concrete, which injured his arm. 3rd officer was struck by concrete that was thrown at him and hit his shin, and another officer was injured by flying glass. When we finish this press conference, we are going to have a meeting with pastors and members of the faith community to update them on what we've learned about this incident and to urge them to continue their work, those that have already started it on their own, as well as to coordinate work with us to try to keep the neighborhood peaceful this evening. It's very important that those people that are in the neighborhood are consistently giving a message of peace and civility. Nothing is being accomplished through acts of violence. Tonight we've activated our major incident response teams. That's a total of 150 officers who have been specially trained in crowd control and management. A number of them were at the scene last night. It's another reason why we've been able to police many protests over the last 2 years without major incident, because these officers are very much trained in the dynamics of crowd control and group psychology, and generally are able to affect peaceful protests without major incident. But we're calling up our members that have all been trained in that. We are going to have all of our officers in 2-officer patrols again. We're holding over the day shift, and the evening shift and swing shifts and tactical shifts are all going to be extended as well. We're going to therefore maintain normal staffing in the districts so as to deal with the normal call for service and crime call load, while still retaining many officers from our various task force and MERT deployments to be able to reinforce areas that may be plagued by disturbances. At this point in time, we do not anticipate outside jurisdiction help. We are very appreciative of the assistance we received so far and the offers of assistance we've received from our federal partners. The Sheriff's Office has contacted us, and they are deploying numerous extra deputies tonight, and they are going to coordinate their deployments in the vicinity with our command posts. We have a very sound working relationship at the operational level with the members of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, and we suspect that that will certainly be useful should there be problems this evening. We also have a very robust mutual aid system in place with our suburban partners if that should be necessary. But we feel, at least at this point in time, based on our understanding of the situation, the size of last night's incident, and our work on trying to develop useful intelligence, that we have sufficient officers of our own, and certainly with the addition of the Sheriff's Department personnel, that should be sufficient. But I mean, obviously we're not prideful here. If we need additional assistance, we will certainly ask for it. That's our update as to now, and we will do our best to answer those questions that you have, and you can start now.
Can you just tell us the officer who was involved in the shooting? What race is that officer?
You know, normally I'd like to think that doesn't matter. I know it does, and I also know that there's been a lot of work on social media trying to identify him, so that there are a number of people here who want to do that officer harm. He happens to be African American, and he has several years of experience and is a very active officer. And we are concerned for his safety, and he has been staying with relatives out of town.
Cap, can you talk about the initial stop? What was the reason for the initial stop? And what has the body camera been able to reveal? Have you looked at?
First part of it, and I have to just give you my understanding of the initial stop. The officers have not been interviewed formally yet, and DCI obviously ultimately controls this investigation. I can say I was advised it was a suspicion stop. They thought this vehicle was behaving in a suspicious manner. It's a rental car, it turns out. We have not ascertained its status as to whether or not it was lawfully rented or stolen or held over. We don't know. But this event, I did look at the tape, and I can tell you this event probably took 20 to 25 seconds. I mean, there was virtually no time between the officer unhooking his seat belt, turning on his body camera, getting out of the car, and immediately he was in a foot chase. And that foot chase went maybe a few dozen feet before he encountered this individual in a fenced yard bordered by two houses. Not really an alleyway, but a way between two houses. And the incident occurred very, very rapidly. So it was very fast. The individual was armed. The individual did turn toward the officer with a firearm in his hand, and the officer, we can't tell when the officer discharges his firearm because with many body-worn cameras, certainly all of ours, there's a 30-second delay before the audio kicks on. I don't know when the shots were fired. And again, this is now all evidentiary and appropriately with DCI. But
would you encourage DCI to release that video for the public's benefit?
Well, I think that's going to have to be part of an ongoing discussion, because we have to weigh a couple of different things here. We have to weigh the public's benefit. We have to weigh the rights of the officer involved. We have to weigh the concerns DCI has to have an investigation that's untainted. I suppose there might be people out there who might say, we might need to protect a potential jury pool someday. I don't know. At this point in time, it's not being released. Whether that changes or not, we'll have to see.
Mayor, answer that question? Mayor, there's people in the community who just don't believe whatever the police have to say. They want to see the video. They just told me down there on camera, they said, until we see the video, we don't believe anything.
I would like to see the video released as soon as possible, but I agree that the officer has not even been interviewed yet, is my understanding, the officer who was involved. And there is the state investigation. But I do think it's in everyone's best interest to be as transparent as quickly as possible. And so I'm hopeful that this will not be a delay, that there will not be a serious delay. But again, I respect the process right now, and I will assure this community that I will do everything I can to make sure that this is released.
Do you want it released tonight before you say, I don't know what might happen?
Again, this officer has his legal rights as well. So I don't think it's appropriate for it to be released today. Again, as I said, I have not seen it. I did see a picture that was lifted from it, and I want our community to know that the individual had a gun. Now, again, I think that there were events that were going because it was so fluid, but I saw a gun in his hand in the still shot that I saw.
Why won't that still shot be released?
Again, that's going to be up to the state.
Because you said last night was the worst situation that anyone in your department or your city.
And again, I want it to be released. I want it to be released as quickly as possible.
Is he alive in that still shot?
I'm sorry.
Is that before he was shot?
I believe it was before he was shot. Yes, I believe it was before he was shot.
Standing up?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
Chief, have there been threats against, have there been threats made against not only the officer, the patrol officer involved, but also other officers as well?
Yes, there are people calling for violence against police officers.
And how is that being handled? Are federal officials involved? Or?
Well, we're doing the best we can to ascertain the source of those threats, and if it requires federal assistance, they have, raised their hand to volunteer to do anything we ask for. In the near term, we're trying to track down the source of those threats and not only identify if they're credible, but identify who's responsible for
Can you
them.
talk about how many threats or what the nature of the threats have been?
I haven't got a number, but there's been threats of violence against police officers and exhortations.
Investigations with officer-involved shootings with DOJ usually taking lead when Milwaukee Police is involved. Is DOJ receptive to requests that information be released before the completion of the investigation?
Well, we'll have to see. This happened last night, okay? I don't think there's anybody in the country that's released a body-worn camera of an officer-involved shooting in 24 hours or 36 hours. I think Chicago set the modern record with a week. So police departments in major cities across the country are aware of the delicate balance between what the community needs to know and our need to calm communities down or at least keep them informed, and also the processes and systems of the criminal justice process. There is a balance act. And every time one of these is released, it's usually a chief erring on the side of transparency at some risk to the criminal justice process. I mean, you're going to find very few, career attorneys who are going to say, oh yes, get that out in public as fast as possible. You may get other police chiefs who say that. You're certainly going to get, some political figures who believe that very strongly, as well as community activists. But this is a balancing act, and we're going to try to do our best here in Milwaukee to get that balancing act right.
Chief, family and friends.
Sorry, you've been trying to, sorry.
Family, friends, and protesters say yes, he was armed, but he did not deserve to die. Can you explain or kind of fill us in on how police are trained to react in these type of situations?
Our officers are trained to protect life, including their own. I'm not going to get into an issue of anybody deserving to die. That's really not the issue here. The issue that will be determined is whether or not, when the officer used deadly force, he faced a credible deadly force threat to himself or another person. Now, ultimately, that will be the conclusion of the investigation. I know what I saw on the video. I know what I see in the still. Certainly appears to me that at the time he made that decision, it was a credible and legally protected decision. But I'm not.
After the release of the video, can you describe it with your words, what you said?
Well, what I saw, I think, is a representation of a very brief foot chase and a circumstance in which the individual that was confronted by the officer had a firearm in his hand and turned towards the officer. I don't know when the trigger was pulled. I don't know the point of entry. There's no autopsy done yet. there's like 100 more credible questions investigators are going to want to get to. So when I get descriptive, I'm looking at a silent movie, all right, that doesn't necessarily tell me everything that will come out in a thorough investigation. So again, I'm walking on ice too. I want to be transparent, but you know the fog of war. You know first reports are frequently wrong or slightly off, and then that's a whole other news cycle. So we're trying to be both open and contained at the same time right now. So I know what I saw, based on what I saw, didn't hear, don't know what the autopsy results are going to be. Certainly appeared to be within lawful bounds.
Chief, we know that the suspect was hit twice. Is that how many shots were fired? And also, was there any other video from other officers, from squad cars, from anything in terms of surveillance video that would shed light on this particular case?
That's something we're looking into now. So I honestly, short term, don't know the answer to that question, but it's a key aspect of any such investigation is to look for other videos, other perspectives, and so on. As to the number of shots that were fired, again, I don't know that. I know the investigators have taken his firearm. I know the scene was searched for shell casings. Again, the officer hasn't been interviewed, so I don't know exactly. My short answer would be not many, but again, I don't know.
Chief, you said that Seville Smith did not comply with the drop your weapon order.
That's correct.
Well, how about the gas station? People are saying there's been reports there, people saying that the gas station owners were mistreating people of a certain community in the neighborhood. You guys have any record of police being called to that gas station recently?
This is a busy area for us. We've been called to virtually every business there at some time or another. There was a recent controversy there. It was extensively covered by the local media involving the proprietors of that store and some unruly customers they confronted inappropriately. And so I do know there have been some issues there, but we have worked with the community, and I know the mayor's Office of Violence Prevention did extensive work in the neighborhood, trying to get the business owners and the local residents on the same page, and my understanding was progress had been made there.
And I would point out that I believe it was, from what I was told, it was community members who helped the 3 employees get out of that building safely, which I appreciate.
There are people in the community who say that they insist that Smith was shot in the back. That's what people have been saying out at the scenes. Can you say definitively that Smith was not shot in the back?
Only reason I can't say it definitively is the autopsy hasn't been done yet. So I would be foolish to try to say that definitively. I do know that he was shot in the chest and the arm. I don't know that he was shot in the back. I'm not being cute. I'm not anything. If the autopsy reveals that, that will be news to me. But to my understanding, that's not true.
But it appears he was facing the officer as opposed to turning away.
Again, I'm going to have to count on what the angle is. I saw what I saw. But, if you've covered these kind of incidents before, body mechanics, kinetics, people are moving, the bullet's going 900 feet per second, where the body was when the bullet was fired and where it was when the bullet hits can move inches. So I don't precisely know its angle. But it's been...
And in that video, do you see the suspect who was hit, do you see any muzzle flash from his gun? Did he fire?
We don't have any reports that he fired his sidearm, no. We do have, video of the officers, administering CPR.
Again, that still photo, can you show us, was the gun up? Or was he holding it in his right hand? I mean, where was it?
It was in his hand. He was raising up with it. And,
can you just show us maybe?
I don't want to, play act here. Hopefully we'll be able to provide you some useful information shortly, and based on that, you'll be able to evaluate the accuracy of what I'm saying now.
Is it a matter of routine that the officer has not been debriefed or questioned yet? And is there a union aspect to this?
Yes, we're able to take a public safety statement at the time that there's an incident like this, and then there's generally at least 24 hours passes before we do a full in-depth interview of the officer.
Is that officer on desk duty now, or what's his status in the police department?
Yeah, he's on administrative status until further notice. That's routine in these matters.
Chief, any update on the burning of the buildings, the investigation going on there? Is there video of it, on who may have been involved in this? What are you seeking?
We're working hard on publicly accessible social media to identify videos taken contemporaneously last night with the events of last night to see if we can identify people engaged in law breaking, including arson, and that's extensive, and so there's a lot of a lot of work needs to be done before we can definitively say that. All right, thank you.
And I want to make this important point. Remember, there was a point when Donald Trump was only polling at 1%. So don't dismiss the idea that it's impossible for Jill Stein to win the election. If you were outraged at mainstream media manipulation, please use the tools below to share this video with everyone you can.